Hey everyone, I just want to start off by saying I'm excited for what God has for us right now. Amen? Let's start off by just jumping straight into the text and we'll read it. And we'll be in John 11, verses 1 to 27 today. A bit of a long passage, I know, but I think it'll be worth the payoff. We've got a lot to dig into, and I think it's going to be really awesome. So, without further ado, John chapter 11, verses 1 to 27. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister Martha. It was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, to Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, the one whom you love is sick. But when Jesus heard this, he said, This sickness will not end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going to go there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. This he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. The disciples then said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus then said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Therefore Thomas, who's called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go so that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. Well, let me start off just by saying, who of you all have ever had little kids or been around little kids in any capacity? I think most of us probably have. And if you have, you know that they're just bundles of fun, but they also love to ask questions. They love to explore and learn about the world. And one of the most common questions that little kids ask is, do you know it? It's why. They ask why. They want to know everything there is to know about the world. And so they say, why? And they'll ask it about the randomest things too. They'll say, like, why is jelly sticky? And you're like, I don't know, just because it is. And they say, but why? And you say, because that's how it's made. And they say, but why? And you're like, okay, well, it's because they take fruit and they smash it up and they get it down to the juice and they boil it with some water and some pectin and I don't know what all else. I don't know how jelly's made exactly, but then they take it, put it in a container, put it in the fridge, cool it down, you get it out, you slap it on some toast or a peanut butter sandwich or whatever, and it's delicious, but it's sticky because it's got the fruit and the juice and the sugar in it. And you know what's coming next. They say, why? And you just grab your hair and you want to pull it out and you're like, oh my goodness, this child is driving me insane. Well, I found myself asking some very similar questions. The same question, really. As I read through this passage, I just couldn't figure out why. Why did John give it to us? Why did he give it to us when he did in his gospel? Why did he even write a gospel at all? And then it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks out of nowhere. John chapter 20, verses 30 to 31. You don't have to turn there, but John tells us straight up, he says, "Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." That's John's purpose in his gospel. He wants us to believe Jesus is who he says he is. It's what ties the whole story together. It's kind of the thread weaving throughout it, and it brings the narrative under this one cohesive unit and idea. And it's very evident in this passage too. So keep that in mind as we jump in, as we dive in to understand this a little better, that John gave us this story when he did in his gospel so that we may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. Well, first things first, Lazarus is sick, and Mary and Martha, his sisters, they send word to Jesus, and they say, "Lord, the one you love is sick. Come quickly. We need you." And yet we're told in verses 5 and 6 that Jesus loved Mary and loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, but when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 days. Why would he do that? Can you imagine what it was like for Mary and Martha? The agony as they waited for Jesus, the one they love, the one they call on. They know he has the power, and yet he doesn't come. Why? Well, let's rewind real quick and just get an overview of John's gospel. John gives us 8 different signs in his gospel, and they kind of bring this story together a little bit. And remember, the purpose of these signs is so that we may believe in Jesus. Well, the first sign occurs in John chapter 2 when Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding. And keep in mind that they get more powerful and they increase in scope and severity at every step. So this one's for life and enjoyment, to enjoy the wedding. We're told that it's the good wine. And then in John chapter 4, Jesus heals an official's son who's sick. Not dead, but sick. And certainly Mary and Martha remembered this. They knew this miracle. And that's why they called on Jesus. Moving forward in John chapter 5, we see actually 2 signs. We see the third and the fourth sign, and it's when Jesus feeds the 5,000. There are 5,000 men plus perhaps women and children present, and he feeds them with just a few loaves and a couple of fish. And then he walks on water in that same chapter to demonstrate the power he has, not just in human affairs as he's done in the first 3 signs, but over all of creation. You see, the sea was like this monster that would consume and destroy you in the ancient mindset. And Jesus just walks right along and says, "I have the power over this." And then in John chapter 6, we're told of the 5th sign. In John 6, Jesus, not only has he healed a sick man, but he makes a lame man walk, a man who's been lame for many, many years. And then in John 9, we're told that he heals a blind man, blind since birth. And this is great power that no one's ever seen before. It's kind of crazy, actually. The people are astonished. And that brings us to John 10. And in John 10, Jesus actually makes this really important claim that's going to tie in to the coming sign, not in our passage, but right after. You see, Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays his life down for his sheep." And not only does he do that, but he says, "I've been given the authority and the power to lay my life down, and I will take it up again." He claims power over life and death. That's absolutely wild. And the Jews there, they understand that because there are two different responses to this. The first response is to look at it and say, you're crazy, you're demon possessed. No way do you have this kind of power. But the second response is the Jews who say, this is crazy, and I don't know how I am supposed to believe this, but I see what you just did in healing the blind man, and I'm going to choose to believe that you have the power you're claiming. And now we're at John 11. Mary and Martha certainly know Jesus' power. They've seen it and they believe in it, but Jesus wants them to deal with a different issue here. It's not just his power, you see, but it's his presence. Is he actually present? Because it certainly looks like he's not present when they call on him. And so we fast forward in the story, we see that Jesus waits 2 days, and then he finally comes to Martha. And when he gets there, he comes to her and says, your brother will rise again. Because Martha came to him and said, Lord, if you had only been here, then my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. But she doesn't quite understand it. She's thinking in the future. She says, I know the resurrection at the last day. I know he'll rise then. And Jesus takes this connection and he makes a jump and he invites her to follow along. And he says, Martha, I am this resurrection. This resurrection is not just future, it's now. It's in the present. I'm here and I am the resurrection and the life. And whoever believes in me will not die, but will experience life now in the fullest. And then he asks her this pointed, this difficult question. He says, Martha, do you believe this? And in that moment, I think it would be so tempting for Martha to respond like some of the Jews in chapter 10 who saw this claim of power that Jesus made and said, no way, you're demon possessed, you're crazy, you don't have that kind of power. But Martha knows the power. She's not dealing with that problem. She's dealing with the problem of Jesus' presence. Is he actually present? Because Martha could have thought, when we called for you, Lord, you didn't come and you weren't here. Have you ever had a time like that when you call for Jesus and he's not there? When you ask for God's help and it seems like he's absent, not present? And yet look, Martha says, I do believe. I believe you are who you say you are, and not just that you have the power, but Martha believes that Jesus cares, that he's present. You see, there's a statement that John tells us. In verse 5, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and John doesn't say, but he waited 2 days. No, John says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so, therefore, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he waited 2 days. Jesus knows that there's actually something a little bit more important than just raising Lazarus. He knows he's here to demonstrate a sign, but he also knows that there needs to be some pause. He presses pause and he waits, and he knows that it's going to be for Martha and Mary's good. That they can learn that Jesus is present. Not just that he's powerful, but that he's present. And that he's actually present in the waiting. You see, I've had waiting periods, and I'm sure you've had waiting periods too. Times when you call for God, you ask for him, and he just doesn't seem to be there. But I'm here to let you know that Jesus is present, even in the waiting. He does care. And sometimes he just has to hold on a little bit for our own good, for our own development, for us to become the kind of person that he needs us and wants us to be. And so I think we're faced with this same question that Martha was faced with. We're faced with the question of, do you believe? I think John knows that we need to ask ourselves this too. Do we believe that Jesus is powerful on the one hand? And maybe more so that he's present, because that's the one I wrestle with. I know God has the power, but sometimes I think he's just not present. I think he just doesn't care. And John says, no. When it seems like he doesn't care, he does, and he's there, and he's in the midst of it. He just asks me, and he asks us to hold on a little bit longer. So I don't know what you're facing right now in life. I don't know if the stress of school and exams and papers and projects and everything is overwhelming you. I don't know if it's family and relational issues. I don't know if it's a specific relationship, maybe a spouse or a significant other. Or it could just be your own personal growth and sanctification, that you're crying out and waiting and asking God to be present. And it just seems like he's not. It just seems like he's not going to answer and he's not going to come. So maybe you're in your 2-day waiting period, much like Martha and Mary were. But I want to encourage you to hang on, hang in there, and trust that Jesus cares and that he's present and that he's powerful over whatever your circumstance. And I want to ask you to just hang in there. Do you believe? Do you believe that he's powerful? Do you believe that he's present? Do you believe that he's present even in the waiting? And that there's a purpose for all of it? Because there is. There's a resurrection coming. And I don't just mean the resurrection at the end of time, like Martha was thinking. Jesus says, I'm that resurrection, and I'm here now. Whatever problem you're facing, Jesus says, I'm enough, and I'm here now. Just wait with me, and we'll handle this.